Welcome to the Hourly Podcast. In today's episode, we sit down with Christie Schatz, Chief People Officer of Sonny's Franchise Company, headquarters for Sonny's Barbecue Franchising. Christie discusses how Sonny's culture is centered around kindness, the challenges of franchising, and the importance of hiring and retaining talent within the restaurant industry. She shares insights on how Sonny's Barbecue operationalizes its core values and the role of general managers in delivering exceptional guest experiences. The discussion also touches on the evolving labor market and the strategies being implemented to address hiring challenges. Enjoy.
This episode is brought to you by JoJo, an AI virtual recruiter powered by Sprockets. Designed for the hourly workforce, JoJo works 24/7 to source, screen, and schedule interviews with the best applicants for your business. JoJo helps reduce employee turnover and time spent hiring so you and your team can focus on other important tasks. To learn more, head to sprockets.ai/JoJo.
Again, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Christie. For those that are listening that don't know anything about you or anything about what you do for work, give us a high-level overview.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm the Chief People Officer for Sonny's Franchise Company. And I don't know if your listeners know anything about Sonny's Barbecue, but Sonny's Franchise Company is the headquarters for the franchise of Sonny's Barbecue. So what we do, and what I specifically do there, is I help franchisees, I support franchisees with their people initiatives. Specifically, I split a lot of my time internally with the corporate office in Orlando, Winter Park. And then I spend a lot of my time out in the field helping support our franchisees. But we're Sonny's Barbecue. We started back in 1968, one of the largest barbecue concepts in the Southeast. And, we've been around for a while. I've been with the company for 23 years.
Congrats.
Yeah. It's a great company to work for. The owners have been fabulous. They're fabulous people. I don't know if you've done any research on our company, but we really, really, really take to kindness. And kindness is a big, 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 it's a big ethos for us, I guess you could say. So, anyways, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. How many locations are there, and where are they geographically in the country?
A little under 100 right now.
Okay.
Growth is number one for us right now. We are spread out through the southeast United States. So anywhere from the Carolinas all the way over to Louisiana, just peppered throughout. Yeah.
Very cool. And, of course, this being the hourly podcast, we love talking about culture and teams, and we've had a lot of different people come in and talk about their core values. And it is something that came across, at least on the research that I did online, was this kindness component. And it stuck out to me, right? Because people always say things like integrity, or they say things like along those lines. But to pinpoint it to kindness, like, where does that originate from, and why is that important?
Wow, that's a great question. It takes me back when we really started looking internally at our culture, as well as we started rebranding. And I would say back in 2014, we really took a deep dive into our core values. And it took a little while to kind of reestablish really what our passions were. Our CEO, he at the time started looking at what are some things that we could do to really take our culture to another level, right? So when we started looking at our values, I don't know if you've ever gone to a company before and you have like these paragraph long values that no one can remember. And you get to a place where it's just something that's in a handbook. And we wanted something really memorable along with, how do we get to a place where our customer as well can feel we operationalize those values? They can feel those values all the way to the front line. So we started with being passionate, being trustworthy, putting others first, and then, of course, doing cool things and having the most fun. That's really kind of where we started. We also, our mission is to spread the spirit of barbecue. So if you kind of encapsulate all of those things, it just kind of, it just speaks kindness. So everything we do, one of the core pieces of what we do We are welcoming for every single person that walks through a Sonny's restaurant door. So kindness is really the underpinning of everything we do. So cue the kindness, little things you can do every day. It's almost like, passing it forward to a degree. How can you be kind to anyone that you come across? That's super important for us and very important for our CEO as well.
Yeah. No, that's super inspiring. And I love that origin story. And thanks for providing that context. And, what's interesting, and we're having more of these conversations, we're here from all different types of operators, right? We have general managers, we have the hourly workers themselves, we have franchisees on here, and we're having more. And I think you are included in that, in the franchisor bucket, right? Where you have franchisees that are borrowing and licensing your brand and your core values and bringing it to their local community, which is a beautiful, wonderful thing. I mean, franchising has done wonders for American economy, but how do you think about scaling kindness to businesses that you don't have complete control over when they're franchisees? And do you have any selection process of things you look for with the franchisees to ensure that they kind of live up to the standard that you're building at corporate?
That's really a fantastic question. It's difficult. I'm going to be completely honest with you, because you're taking these values all the way to the front line. Franchisees have complete control of their hiring and all of that good stuff. I think a lot of it is getting out in the field and really modeling those behaviors. If you're not out in the field face to face with people and just having these wonderful conversations on a day-to-day basis, that's one part of it. I think the other part is when you're bringing franchisees on, you need to make sure that they all share the same sort of values. When you're operationalizing those, you also have to have some sort of behavioral component where everybody's using the same language. They have the same sort of behaviors that are modeling those modeling those words. And then it just, in the course of visiting frontline team members, you can see those behaviors at the front line if you have franchisees that are following suit. So a lot of FaceTime, a lot of conversations, a lot of reinforcement of, who we are, what we stand for. And then of course, franchisees are following a little bit of our, how we hire.
Right.
The characteristics that we look for. I do have a people ops task force that we started a couple of years ago with our franchisees. And a lot of the conversations that we have around people who we hire, the same sort of things that bring a great guest experience. We all take those things to heart and we take those things very seriously. So franchisees are looking for those sort of characteristics when they're hiring team members as well. So
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. Like in the hourly book, we touched on and we interviewed amazing people on this topic specifically, but you have a type of person that chooses to franchise, right? And not just I'm not talking smack by any means, but that person who chooses to franchise versus starting their own barbecue joint has a certain set of characteristics. One being they enjoy following a playbook, right? Like they don't want to have to create their own logo. They don't have to create their own name. They don't have to create their own menu. They want to create this. So it's a type of person that really thrives in structure versus unstructured. Otherwise, they would start AJ's barbecue and try starting from scratch, right? But because of joint employer and some other restrictions that you corporate have of getting involved in their hiring process, they're kind of left alone or without complete guidance on what I would argue to be, and you probably would argue, I don't want to put words in your mouth, to be the most important part of the restaurant, which is the hiring and people motion. And so you have these group of people that super interested in structure, and then all of a sudden around a really important part of their business, they're restricted as to what guidance they can get. How do you kind of wrap that? How do you support, and you don't have to go into the specifics, but how do you think about that? And is that a challenge that you see in the field?
Wow. It can be challenging. Well, let me first start with our franchisees. Our franchisees are wonderful people, and I've known them all for a very long period of time. We all have very, very, very good relationships with each other. I think if you can influence and try to help them, and they're open to listening, I think that's part of it. I think listening is a huge component of the relationship. Sometimes they don't want to follow our processes when it comes to hiring or recruiting or what have you. But at the end of the day, we're talking about people, right? So they're going to want to use, for the most part, the tools we use. But again, if they don't, we will help them try to find a tool if we need to. But for the most part, they're really open to kind of following the things that we do. Every franchisee is a little different too. You have some franchisees who are just mom and pop. They have one store. You have a few franchisees who might have a handful of stores. And then you have some that are, some of our largest franchisees that really have to scale.
Right.
And so the technologies they use or what have you may be different. But at the end of the day, I think we're focused on the types of people who can deliver the best guest experience. I think that's the most important thing to remember here. And I think if your listeners are taking this to heart, the guest at the end of the day is who we're trying to really please.
Yeah.
And so, our franchisees, they're gonna look at me and say, we don't want to hire people that aren't going to deliver that guest experience. So how do we get to that place? And a lot of the tools we use internally, they don't use our tools, but at the end of the day, we still want the same types of people who kind of have this relationship extension to our guest.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense and super clear. And I love that answer. So when you're meeting with the franchisees and, you mentioned you have a people ops kind of task force, like what are some of the bigger issues that you're starting to hear today? So like, as you know, labor market's gone from crazy to crazier to not so crazy. And, we're kind of in this new normal, right? Post-COVID. What do you think the next wave of challenges are becoming? And, what are some things you've identified as mission critical to 2025?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we're still out of the clear yet with finding great managers. I think that's super important to remember. I think that if we can try to work on that next year, I think we'll be really successful. The hourly recruiting has gotten much better. It seems that the conversations I've had with franchisees, they're able to find hourlies. The retention's getting better, so those things are great. When it comes to finding really good managers, and on top of that, really good GMs who can really deliver the messages that we need to deliver the best guest experience, that's still something in the works. So we're relooking at development programs specifically for GMs next year.
Right.
As well as on the front line, we're going to, and we have already started looking at the guest journey and how do we train specifically to the guest journey, starting with the welcome and the farewell, and how do we really make sure that we're making some impact there. But the GM carries all of that. The GM is the one who's, hiring the right people who can do that, who can ensure that the food's coming out consistently and following operational standards and all of those things. So the GM is probably one of the most important pieces of the puzzle right now.
Yeah. Totally get it. Well, we are coming up on time, but based on our conversation, I feel like we could do part 3, part 4, part 5, and maybe we will in the future. So excited for that. I ask every single guest a parting question, and I've heard funny answers, I've heard wholly inspiring answers, and just about everything in between. It's, what was your first hourly job, and were you released from that job gracefully, or did you get fired?
My first job was a cashier at a movie theater here in Orlando. I left voluntarily on very good terms. I did learn a lot from that job, especially as it relates to the employee experience.
Right.
I left to go to college. I went to Florida State, so don't hold that against me. I know we're not doing too well this year.
Yeah. Too funny though. And if somebody wants to get in touch or learn more about what you do, what is the best way for them to do it? And we'll drop it in the link in Spotify and YouTube and all those things.
LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch with me.
Okay. Perfect. Yep. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I enjoyed today's conversation.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you for having me. It was very nice getting to know you.
Great. Cool.
Thank you.